So where did it all begin for you? Like growing up and stuff, were you always somebody who was, I guess, attracted to film and TV and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, yeah, Jesus. I mean, I was a total TV addict when I was a kid, watching just watching all kinds of weird shit, whatever I could get on TV. And my house, I grew up in Cashel, County Tipperary, which is a small town in the country in the country. But there, luckily, there was a cinema just literally around the corner from my house, so I kind of got went to the cinema as often as I could. Saw all kinds of weird shit there too, because it was the late 70s, early 80s. There was a good time for interesting movies.
Is there anything that, looking back now, that really stands out for you as maybe like a pivotal, either terrifying moment in film or TV, or something that maybe really grasped your imagination?
Yeah, I remember going to a there was a sort of a revival screening of Taxi Driver, which had been out. I mean, Taxi Driver came out in '78, so it definitely wasn't then, but it was maybe like '81. I saw that at the local cinema, and it was the first time I kind of really understood what a director does, because you could really see Scorsese, using the camera in a way that most people didn't. And I also remember going to see a screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, probably around 81, 82. Again, it was a revival, it was a second run. And it was on the lower half of a double bill with an Australian biker movie called Stone. So it came up first. And for some reason, the projectionist had the volume turned up, jammed up full by accident. So the opening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the sound effects, the darkness, the flash bulbs, the subliminal shots of rotting flesh. I was sitting there, I was probably 15, maybe 14, 15, and I have never, ever in my life, I don't think I've ever been so scared before or since. So I kind of was on the point of just jumping up and running out of the cinema, and I just thought, no, that'd be embarrassing. I'll stick with it, and I watched the movie, and I think that was probably the closest I came to ever running out of a screening in terror, and not doing that was definitely a turning point.
So from there, then, did that, I guess, push you away from the genre, or like maybe intrigue you more and like I want more of that feeling?
Yeah, no, I never. I've always been a huge fan of horror movies. I've never stopped since I was a kid. Um, there's been periods in my life when it's been less interesting and been less stuff out there to watch. But I've always, I just never, it's an area that I always wanted to work in, and it took a long time to find the way in. Really, I guess.
And I guess then going back to like your career, was there a specific moment in time that you decided, the idea of being a writer, director, being involved in filmmaking was something that you wanted to like really seriously pursue?
Yeah, well, I went to art school because I mean, I grew up in the countryside and I didn't know anybody in show business. Nobody I knew worked in film or television. Nobody, there was no way in. So I ended up going to art school to be a painter. And by coincidence, they were doing a film course. They just started a new film course there. It was the college that's now called IADT in Dunleary. Then it was Dunleary College of Art. And I realized that painting was kind of temperamentally something I was unsuited for, but I could see the film students having what looked like a really good time running around doing crazy shit. So I jumped from painting into film. My student film, which I made after at the end of the 3 year course, I was able to sell it to RTE for 50% more than what it cost to make it. And I kind of thought at that point, okay, well, maybe there's a viable career path here. I mean, I was soon to learn how difficult it was to actually survive and how lucky I was to have made money on my very first film. But it took me years to actually follow up on that. But that was really the point where I started to think, yeah, I can do this for a living.
And would you say you're one of those people that's in favor of going to college and doing it that way? So I feel like there's a very split opinion, um, with filmmakers and creatives. I think in general, some people are like really against it, and they just seem to be of the mind of you should just go out and do. Especially now, just get your phone, get a camera, get anything, and just make. And then other people seem to be on the lines of, well, you should go down that maybe more traditional route of film school, and even if you only use it to develop relationships and connections.
Well, it's when I was there, it was a very different time. I mean, everything, there was no such thing as, you know, making a film with your phone. I mean, it was everything. We were shooting on film, and even video, if you used it, was much less, much more difficult to use and much more difficult to make look interesting. So everything had to be shot in film. It had to look good. So pardon me. So the only way you could get hold of the means of production, the only way you could get hold of a film camera, film processing, editing benches, all the stuff that you need, was to be in a film school. So it was a it was a necessity then. Now it's much less of a necessity, and I don't know if I would recommend to anyone to do it, especially with how expensive these things are, and the fact that the people who are teaching you in the film courses are usually the people who have failed to actually to make a success for themselves in the outside world as filmmakers. So, are you really going to learn anything from these people? It's tricky. I think the argument that I've heard is, oh, it's a good place to make connections and meet people, and that's probably true. But with the internet the way it is, I mean, you can make connections and meet people lots of different ways. I think the thing is, if you're the kind of person that's a self-starter and can make a film on your own, short film or whatever, with a bunch of your friends, then great, you should do that. If you're the kind of person that needs a more structured environment, go to film school and try it there, I guess.
Yeah, that's because I was gonna follow that up with, if you had to start again in, I guess, the current climate, like where would you go? Would you just start and just
I don't have the slightest idea. Oh my God, it's like everything I did seemed to be kind of like, almost by coincidence or by just being in a particular place at a particular time. If I had to start all over again, it would be. I don't know that I do films anymore. I mean, I think I'd probably be working in video games or something like that. Because it's not film isn't the it's not the cutting edge place that it used to be. I still love film, but it seems increasingly irrelevant to the 21st century generation.
and how do you feel like, obviously we'll get to it in a second, your newest movie, but I guess in that modern age, like as a as a working filmmaker, how do you feel about I guess, how much more accessible things like streaming have become? Like, I feel like now there's, and I never thought I'd say something like this, but there's like too much content and too many streaming platforms and too many places that it kind of dilutes it to the point where a lot of it, like you just said, kind of becomes somewhat irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, accessibility is great. I love the fact that you can get hold. I mean, it's marvelous that a young person who wants to explore the history of film can go and find Murnau or Todd Browning, or there's you can't. When I was a kid, you couldn't get hold of these older films. If you were lucky, you might see something on TV, and you would remember it, and you would tell your friends about it, but you couldn't show it to them, because there was no way of recording. It wasn't possible. So the fact that now the entirety of film history is at your fingertips, that's great. The thing that's more difficult is my film, when I bring out a film, is competing with the entire history of cinema, because it's like, do I want to watch All You Need Is Death, or do I want to watch Suspiria? Do I want to watch it? It's that's never been the case before.
Yeah.
So it makes it much more difficult. And also, of course, the streamers are pumping out content, as they call it, at a huge rate. I think what's making it more difficult is the ways that streamers find to pay you less or more over a longer period of time. Like, I've sold films. I'm not sure whether the current film I'm making is going to have this fate, but I have sold films to Netflix in the past. And what looks like a kind of a fairly decent chunk of money ends up getting spread out over the 5-year license period in quarterly payments. So you get 1/20th of what you think you're getting, 1/20th per quarter over five
Yeah.
years. Just, I mean, it's not significant, and it's killing independent film, because in the olden days, you would make a film, you would sell the film for a lump sum, then you'd have the money to make maybe another film or to live while you're writing another film. Now that is much more difficult to get. So it's not. there's not a simple answer to that question. It's streaming has and the digitization of cinema has both helped and hindered and made the whole landscape a more difficult and a more accessible place to be at the same time. So you just have to kind of figure out how to work with all those things.
You know, you're not the first person that I've had conversations with that have said that about the idea of um this thing of like they've gotten more and more creative with ways to like somehow skim off the top every so often. And it's like,
Oh,
I don't think people realize that. I guess from the outside looking in, somebody would say, "Oh, you sold a movie to Netflix, or you sold a movie to Shudder, or whatever streamer it might be."
mm-hmm.
And it seems like this, this huge, amazing thing, and it's like, wow, amazing. It's like, while it's great that it can get out there, and there is maybe a built-in audience of, I don't know, however many hundreds of millions of people, but it's like I'm getting pennies on the dollar here for each
Yeah.
stream or whatever way they work it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure some people's deals are good. I know that I've had some that were not particularly favorable. We'll see what happens. I'm working with a very good distributor in this with XYZ Films, and they're very good at. They know how to do the deal. They know how to do a positive. Hopefully they know how to do a deal that works for everybody. We'll see. I mean, it's just the trouble is, as a filmmaker, if your film doesn't make money, how do you make another film? How do you? Because I don't have any, I don't have another job. I just do this, and I have to survive off it. So it's kind of it's a bit of a struggle, but it's one I chose myself, so I can't complain.
And I guess to talk a bit closer to home, because obviously we're both in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like about the state of, I guess, a career like yours in Ireland? I don't know whether it's an inherently Irish thing, and I don't know if you'll have the same opinion, but I feel like we're a very odd kind of group of people in a way where there is a lot of like, I don't know if begrudgery is a word, but like we don't a lot of people don't like to see others succeed and stuff like that. And then obviously the way of a filmmaker is already, I think, kind of like the 1%, like it's a very risky lifestyle, I guess. Um, do you feel the support like from Ireland and the Irish film industry?
Uh, I mean, I certainly feel supported by Ireland. I mean, we've had a great deal of, the goodwill around my film is astonishing. I think partly because I'm tapping into an existing scene in the music that is thriving and that people are very proud of. I mean, I'm tapping into not just the folk and ballad scene, but also the kind of music scene that exists around the cobblestone, around Lancome, around Mary Wallopers, around lots
Hmm.
of these, bands where younger people have kind of done an extraordinary job of rejuvenating our national traditional music and turning it into something 21st century. So I'm getting a lot of support from that quarter. Film, I don't really know. I mean, we'll see. I mean, film hasn't come out yet. We've had one screening in Ireland, Cork Film Festival, the Irish premiere, which was tremendously positive. I don't really see myself as part of a film scene here in Ireland. I hang out with the people I know mostly are artists, photographers, musicians. I know some filmmakers, but we all make hugely different films to each other. I don't know any horror filmmakers here. I know Conor McMahon and Conor's a mate, but the kind of films Conor makes are couldn't be more different from the films I make. And I don't kind of hang out. There's not really a scene. I'm just kind of I mean, my core thing is my films are all this film and the other features I'm developing that I hope to make in the next few years are essentially very, very Irish. I'm not trying to or are interested in going to the US and doing a franchise or doing I don't want to do that. And whether or not that works out for me, I'll find out over the next few years. But certainly, I don't have anything against the Irish filmmakers that have use their success to walk that path, because I think it's fantastic that Irish filmmakers are making big internationally successful horror movies. It's just that that's a kind of a I feel like I've got other stuff I want to do, and that's the way it should be. There's got to be different kinds of filmmakers doing different kinds of things in this country if we're going to have a thriving film industry.
Yeah, it's funny, and like maybe it's just from some of the experience I've had or conversations behind the scenes, but I can't help but feel like sometimes, like, I don't know if you're aware of Lee Cronin, for example.
Absolutely. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and like,
Of course, I know.
yeah, and I can't help but feel like, over the last however many years, like 8, 10 years, he's always kind of been there, but didn't seem to get like a huge amount of like, I guess, support, I would say, from Ireland itself. And then as like, the hole in the ground comes out and that, it's getting all this buzz, and then he gets announced that he's working with Sam Raimi and he's going to do Evil Dead Rise. And everybody's like, oh yeah, I love Lee. Yeah, of course. My guy Lee, we've always loved his work. It just seems really weird that like, everybody kind of jumps on it then. And I feel like obviously I've seen the new movie, and I feel like that you might experience a similar kind of, I guess maybe like the mainstream people will jump in on this, because I feel like folk horror, and especially anything Irish, I feel like there's like untapped potential there. And obviously the States and places like that love that stuff.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I'm in LA in a couple of weeks, and I'm supposed to have meetings with people who are, who are linked to big horror franchises that you would definitely
Yeah.
know. And I'm happy to talk to them, but I don't really know if there's a space for me in there. I think what Lee Cronin has done is fantastic, and as you say, maybe he wasn't getting a lot of support until success started to knock. But that's the way with pretty much everything. I mean, most of the musicians I know, until they started to become very successful, nobody was supporting them. And as soon as you get your first award nomination or whatever, then everybody suddenly is. That's just the way of people. It's not specific to Ireland. It's not specific to film. It's just, people love to be associated with something as soon as they know that it's successful. The limited amount of we've had really good reviews and really good festival kind of premieres for All You Need Is Death. And hopefully that will continue. And if people start to get excited about it because of that, I'm not gonna criticize them. Fine.
Hmm.
As long as they're willing to be supportive, I don't mind what their motivations are, really.
And obviously, you alluded to it a second ago, and you said you don't really have a major desire to, jump on any existing IPs or anything like that.
Not really.
But let's say you have those conversations in LA, and they're quite positive conversations. Is there any particular, I don't know, franchise or character that you would favor over the other, or
Well,
is it
mine,
some?
mine are pretty obscure. Have you ever seen the movie Blue Sunshine?
I think I have actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those movies that could be. It's because the original movie, it's cool, but it's not great. It's got a great idea, and it kind of works. I'm kind of going, it's such a great idea. It could be done again better. There's a couple of movies like that that I think are kind of have a really cool central idea that could be reworked, but very few. Larry Cohen's God Told Me To is a really important film for me, and it's kind of a shoddy film. It's not well made. It's got some really really ropey stuff in it, but it is just one of the most original and brilliant genre films of the '70s at the same time. So there's always, I'd never say never. If somebody said, we'll track down the IP for a film you want to do a remake or whatever of, then those are the ones I'd be kind of talking about. I wouldn't be talking about Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess to go back to All You Need Is Death. When you sit down in front of a blank page, like how does, I guess, an idea like that, to give the audience a, obviously when this releases, people will be just kind of starting to see it. I couldn't help but wonder the whole time. And I'll have it from time to time, but I was really like, God, like where did this, how does this come out of somebody's mind? Like it's just so, I don't even know how to explain it. It's such a like surreal kind of like fever dream. As I was watching it, I was like, this is like, I would love to know where you just like sitting in a coffee shop one day and we're like, huh.
It's not that easy. No, I mean, I find writing very, very difficult. It's not an easy process for me. It can be fun when it's working. With All You Need Is Death, I think first off, the music, Lankum
Yeah.
was in my head, and I knew that the music they do is so cinematic. I knew somebody would end up doing a movie with their music, and I didn't want it to be a shit, mediocre film. And I kind of thought, if somebody's going to do it, maybe it should be me. And then I started thinking about music and horror and thinking about even the term folk horror and going, it struck me that nobody had leaned into the folk aspect, the folk music aspect of folk horror. People talk about the Wicker Man and stuff, but the songs in the Wicker Man are kind of background and they're kind of silly. They're kind of kitschy. The summers that come in
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. It doesn't work on a kind of. I mean, when music is good, to me, it works on an emotional level, and the music in The Wicker Man wasn't even trying to do that. So I kind of thought, well, if you could do a story where the ballad, where the music was central to it, how would that feel? And the idea of a song that had a taboo or a curse on it and could not be recorded, could not be translated, at risk to, something terrible happening to you, kind of followed from that. And then other aspects kind of fell into place around that. A certain amount of it I made a documentary some years ago called While You Live Shine, which is about the main character is a guy called Chris King. Chris is a big collector of 78 RPM records, some of which, he has records that he might have the only copy of this particular incredibly important blues or country song from 1921, 25, whatever. He might have the only copy of that in existence. And people get very emotional and very obsessive and very weird about these records. And I kind of sort of superimposed some of the stories and the things I'd heard from the record collecting scene onto the song collectors in the film, and it kind of fell into place from there in a weird way. The first half of the film kind of fell into place quite quickly. The second half took longer, and I think it's probably visible from the film that I kind of don't write the bits that I find boring. What
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the filmmaker who said it. He said recently, I was reading an interview, and this guy said, in movies there's these things called obligatory scenes, which are the bits you have to put in, and they're the bits I always leave out. And I totally got that, because that's kind of like what I did as well. It's like I don't want to do the joiny up bits. I want to do the fun bits, and that's what you get.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see that. And when you're like, I guess, mid process of fleshing out this whole thing, do you I guess do you dive head first into like do you watch things like The Wicker Man and things around other folk horror, or do you read books, or eh, do you do anything like that to try and maybe, I don't know, stoke the fires a bit if you're looking for inspiration?
I went the opposite way completely, and I watched a lot of J horror because I was thinking how much I enjoy Kiyoshi Kurosawa's films, and I watched Cure, and I watched Pulse again, and I watched a lot of his films, and I watched a lot of films around that and Korean films, and kind of was looking at how those films operate, because I knew that I didn't want to do a story that it couldn't be carried along by the words. There's a thing that script editors always say, which is everything has to be on the page, and I say that's shit. Everything can't be on the page, because then you're writing a novel, not a screenplay. So what I did was the words on the page were the skeleton of the story and the characters, and everything else came to it in the visuals and the music. And it was about
Mhm.
constructing that, and kind of to kind of figure out how to do that. I watched a lot of what I would call very vibey films: Possession, Andrei Zhvarsky's film, Pulse and Cure. Suspiria is always a favorite, and kind of worked on trying to figure out how to to make the film more than what the words on the page were.
Just from the last like 15 minutes of this conversation, I've like really started to notice how like clued in you are um to horror in general, and like a vast array of horror. How come was it a conscious decision that you have only really kind of maybe dove into the genre now, or was it something where, because a lot of people say, oh well, horror's like the go-to if you want to try and like, I don't know, make it for like little money and try and get a big return. So like now I don't know if this is the case, but supposedly, I don't know, producers, financiers love the idea of a good horror movie because they feel like they can make money off of it easier.
Maybe, but I mean, there's an awful lot of terrible horror movies out there. I
Yes,
don't know.
that's true.
I mean, something like Terrifier 2, which is not my cup of tea, but you can see very clearly that the reason that film did so well and made so much money is because the guy knows exactly what he's doing. He's really, really, I mean, he's a VFX guy as well. So he was, I mean, you can't do that cynically, you can't do it for money. You have to do it because you love it, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel the same. My short films that I made back in the 80s and 90s were all genre, were all horror. But the trouble is, I couldn't get anything financed in Ireland. I kept trying to get movies made, and every time I went to the Irish Film Board, as it was then, they just got quite freaked out because they'd never seen anything like this before. I remember submitting one script I was developing, and the reader's notes came back and said, I haven't read anything like this before, but it must be ripped off from something because otherwise it's too original. I can't believe that they would come up with something this original. So that was the kind of mindset I was facing into. So I gave up and just went to direct TV drama in the UK. Did that for a few years, and then ended up, when I wanted to do my own stuff, it was a lot easier to make documentary. I couldn't get arrested with my scripts. So I started working on documentaries and made documentaries about subjects I was very interested in. And that became kind of the thing for about 10 years that I did. But when I got to the point of thinking, well, I'm in my 50s, I really need to do something now. It's time to shit or get off the pot. The thing I wanted to do was a horror movie. So I came back to it.
So like that desire, I guess, never really went away at any point. It was always there.
Yeah. And I think COVID lockdown was a very a turning point for lots of people. And the final rejection by Screen Ireland to one of my projects during COVID lockdown was what kind of, that's when I became the Joker. That's when I just said, you know what, I've got a little bit of money in the bank. I made a small inheritance when my parents died, and we sold their house, and I've got, like, probably the filming budget for the film was we on paper 150 grand. We probably really had about 125, and more than half of that was my own money, which was all the money I had. And basically I've been completely broke for the last year because I just didn't, because all my savings went into this. So it was just a case of, if I'm going to do this, I better do it, and I better just bite the bullet. Otherwise I'll be just complaining for the rest of my life, like a lot of, sitting in Grogan's giving out, as happens to a lot of Irish artists. I don't want to be that.
So there's something, right, that I think is key, and it was something that I kind of wanted to elicit, I guess, from this conversation, was what you just said there. And I don't think people, and it's probably, again, I was going to say it seems like an Irish thing, but I think I'm just using that as like the focal point. But the guy, I guess, who sits on the bar stool and kind of recites all of the things he was gonna do or could have done, or if this had have happened, or if somebody had given me that, I would have been able to do this. Uh, how difficult, and how, I guess, risky it would seem to a lot of people listening to have that money in the bank and to turn around and go, do you know what? I'm gonna double down. I'm gonna go all in on myself. And especially, like, you know, you said, like, you hit your 50s, and to still have that passion and desire to be like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do it. I want to do it. I've always wanted to do it. It's never went away. And I'm gonna, a lot of people would find it hard to part with €100 and bet on themselves. Do you think, though, that's the key to being successful, is you have to kind of have that little bit of I don't want to, like, quote, somebody like Conor McGregor, but he talks about that thing of, like, you kind of have to be a little bit mad to the process of the whole thing. You have to be a little bit gone and a
Well,
little bit, like, out there.
I don't know about being out there. I mean, certainly. I mean, it struck me actually recently that I'm not a gambler. I hate gambling. I have a real problem with the idea of gambling as a thing that preys on poor people and their desire for a windfall. But actually, I'm a huge gambler in my personal life, and my work life, because I gambled massively on myself that this would work. But I think that's a thing where you're kind of like it's like you're backing a horse, but you're also the horse, and it's it's interesting because I kind of felt I could do this. I was arrogant enough to think, well, I have spent years watching movies. I've spent years in the film and TV industry. I kind of think if I can't do this now, I'll never be able to do it. So, yeah, it was a risk, but also a ton of things had to go right for this to work. And I had a huge amount of good luck, and I also had an incredibly good and professional crew working with me who helped to realize this. And Ian Lynch, obviously, coming on board was a massive thing. All these things kind of helped to take, I kind of knew in my sort of the cynical part of my brain, or the part of my brain that understands how you get things out there, knew that having, Ian's music and Lankam's kind of, involvement with the film would certainly bring something to the table. I didn't know that during the year we were making the film that Lankum would suddenly go much bigger than they had been, get international award nominations, all this stuff. That wasn't something I knew. The other thing I didn't know was that RTE would implode, because I'd been working as a factual filmmaker doing stuff, and I could kind of always not, I never got huge amounts of backing from RTE, but I could always kind of depend on them to go, there'll be something there. That's non-existent now. They've more or less, I mean, it's, you can't even get an email return from them right now. So if I had waited and sat quiet and tried to keep going business as usual, I would have been completely screwed, because my business as usual way of earning some money and generating some work disappeared during 2023. So I kind of say, I think that taking the risk, if you feel it's the right thing to do for you, then maybe it is the right thing to do. I'd be very hesitant to recommend what I did to anybody else, because I figured out a path for myself that worked for me, and it won't necessarily work for anybody else. But I certainly think as an artist, you have to double down and have complete faith in your work and go all the way as far as you need to, because nobody else will. If you don't have faith in yourself, nobody else will.
And this is like I guess the stuff I love to kind of get from people, because I find it fascinating. I feel like people don't hear, I guess, the more real or raw version. A lot of it is condensed down into these like 5 minute YouTube shorts of like, guys screaming at the camera and stuff, which I don't think is like the reality for a lot of people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not as, to do that now, I guess, and it's a case of I suppose you'll never really know the other side. I think we all assume, we take a risk or take a jump, you'll assume, oh, you know what, actually maybe if I hadn't have done this, it would have worked out better. And it's like it's a case of like, well, you never would have known, and the other option, like you just said, could have been a million times worse.
Yeah.
And you would have had to live that out forever. I guess now, as you face the obviously you're away to the States tomorrow as of we're recording this. You're going to be in New Orleans, Kansas, LA, all these different places, the Overlook Film Festival. Um, how do you feel now? Like, is there excitement brewing there? Obviously, like you've said, and I've seen it online, this thing is really starting to like pick up some serious steam. Like I've seen this crop up a lot on Reddit and Dread Central and Bloody Disgusting and stuff. Like all these places are really starting to pick this up. Um, like how does it feel now as you're on the eve of, I guess, getting ready to step on the plane?
Well, I hope it continues. I don't assume it's going to, I mean, it's a very, very peculiar film. Um, the people who like it really like it. Like my favorite letterboxd review is one that just goes, fuck. This film is definitely not for everybody, but it absolutely is for me. And that's the end of the review. And that's kind of, that's the response I enjoy eliciting, when people feel like only I will. It's a great feeling when you discover a film that feels like it's made just for you. The thing is, a lot of people go to see it like at festivals or whatever, and they want to, bloodbath, or they want to, yeah, they want something different, and it's not that kind of film. It's not a Terrifier type movie. It's not, it's very much its own film. So the upside of that is the people who like it love it. The downside of it is the people who don't get it or don't like it tend to just go like, I don't know, I don't understand what this is about. It's fine. It was made for such a low budget that to cut through the way it is cutting through is exactly what it was designed to do. And if I'd made a more impersonal, more derivative kind of story, I don't think you would have heard of it. It would have just flatlined and dropped to the bottom of the algorithm. The fact that it is peculiar, it's personal, it's odd, it doesn't run like a normal movie. It has a lot of music in it. There's periods where you don't hear any dialogue for 5 minutes, just music. These are unusual things, and for the people that like them, they love them. So I just hope that it's odd going to the US with it, where I recently, we had our UK premiere in Glasgow, and it went down great there,
Yeah.
partly because I think Scotland has a very similar culture with folk songs. Scots Gaelic is very similar to Irish. They got it. But what do people think in Louisiana? Well, again, it's a big city for music, so I hope they'll kind of tap into the fact that the film is very much about the power of music and how music can be misused and how music needs to be respected. And I hope they'll get that.
And I guess, like, in a way, without to kind of, I guess, sound like I'm tainting the work, it doesn't hurt the fact, I think, that it's like, it's this Irish kind of folk lore, that you're kind of digging into, and there's some really, like, unsettlingly creepy visuals and stuff. Like, I'm assuming people have seen the trailer at this point, and like, there's the thumbnail of the guy with the, it's it it is unsettling, and I do think that, you know, if you're on the fence maybe about, "Oh, I don't really get, like, what the background is gonna be," I feel like those kind of movies are the ones that work the best in a way, because 'cause they're like, we enter this world that feels really lived in. Like, that's how I felt. It was like this weird fever dream where I was like, "I don't really understand any of this, but I also feel like I want to understand it," and it's, like, given me enough to love this, but also I've kinda left at the end going, "Huh, I can't, like, I can't get rid of it." It's, like, there, and I'm like, I kinda wanna go back and, like, look at it again, and, like, then I wanna find out, like, is this actually a thing, and did that thing, like, is this based off of something that's actually going on? And I feel like it kind of, I allows for maybe this, I don't know, I guess, larger world than what we see. Like, obviously you mentioned, it was made for just over 100 grand, but it feels like there's, like, this whole uh, world that we kind of don't get to see just behind the veil, um, which I think is probably the best part of it, because everybody's going to interpret that just that little bit differently.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That it feels like a world, because I mean that was part of it's when you're doing it in a low budget, trying to find locations that aren't that have something special about them, and you don't have the money to paint or construct or create anything new, so you're
Mm,
kind of using what's there. And we screened it in LA, and this guy came out of the screening and he said, I'm Irish, I'm from Dublin, I didn't recognize a single location in that film. Where did you film it? And I'm like, well, it was Dublin. It's like, Pigeon House down by Pool Beg, like nowhere exotic. But I really, really wanted it to feel. I watch a lot of Irish movies, and I just feel they've been designed by Board Fulcha. There's going to be your green fields and your Ullin pipes and your Martello Tower and I didn't even put the pool by chimneys in, even though we were filming right there, because I kind of felt it was too Dublin, and just to kind of avoid giving it a sense of place that didn't feel like any place you'd seen before. And I'm really glad if that works. That's absolutely fantastic, particularly with Irish people. I think with Americans that works in a different way, because they're used to seeing this even in kind of genre films, they all tend to go to the same kind of. You'll see the canals, you'll see
mm.
ghost estates, whatever. It's kind of like that's a vocabulary I wanted to avoid. So, yeah, if it worked for you in that way, then I'm really thrilled.
Yeah, it's funny now that you mentioned it, and I didn't actually think of it at the time, but for sure, as somebody who, like, has, born and raised in Ireland, has been all over the country, I kind of felt like I was like, huh, this is a side of Ireland that I didn't know existed, but I also love it. And I was like, this is exactly what I've been saying all this time, where there's got to be more to Ireland. And then I'm like looking at it going, where? Because that was something I was going to ask. Was like, where was this shot? I was like, was this even shot in Ireland? This looks like what? This is a whole other side of the country. As someone who's lived in Ireland for 30 odd years at this point. Um, okay, I have a few final, just quick fire questions before I let you
Mhm.
go. Because I am conscious of your time.
Grand.
Um,
Work away.
Obviously, folk horror has gotten, like, a lot more mainstream, I feel like, in the last maybe 10, 15 years, especially. There's been a couple of, like, I guess, standout titles mainstream wise. Like, with Ireland having such a rich history and, like, a lot of folklore and stuff like that, do you think that there's room for more of this stuff? Obviously, not ripping off the idea of, oh, let's use folk music and stuff like that, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more under the surface to Ireland.
Oh man, I mean, absolutely. I've got two more projects I'm currently writing, both of which are drawn on fairly recent Irish history from the 70s and early 80s. And I think I'm tapping into stuff that nobody has touched before, not because it's unknown or obscure, but just because people have very set ways of thinking about history. And history is a big thing for me, and reading and research is a big thing. So I've been doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of research into fairly recent events, and finding areas in them that haven't been that are open to a treatment in a horror movie. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm working on something that is set during the mid 70s, the north of Ireland, the Troubles, from the point of view of a protagonist that you would not normally see in an Irish movie. And it's incredibly interesting to write. I wouldn't say fun, because it's pretty grueling. It's based around real life atrocities, real life war crimes. But it's got that feeling of, okay, I'm opening a door here that nobody else has even looked at. And that's kind of why I want to keep doing stuff in Ireland. Part of it is because I feel very strongly Irish, but also if I go to the US and I'm making a movie about a serial killer in a small town in Maine, I'm going to it's just, you're under the shadow of Stephen King, you're under the shadow of John Carpenter, you're under the shadow of everybody. If you want to escape from that, I think digging into your own backyard is the best way to do it, and doing it honestly and openly and with a real desire to see what comes up, because Ireland, people have been making films here since, I think the first Irish feature film was Putcheen in 1978, 79. So it's only a fairly short history. That's what, 25, not 20, sorry, 45 years, or thereabouts. And there's so much that hasn't been done. So it's exciting, and I don't know if I'd have that excitement if it went somewhere else.
Yeah, it's wild because I've always felt like that, but it was like, I guess, we might get a movie here and there, and you'd be like, oh, is this person going to be, I guess, like the trailblazer, or the one to like open the door and show other people, oh wait, no, I don't have to, like, I guess, run away to America, or I don't have to run away to the UK. There's a lot to be said for here, and there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of stories we could tell from here. Or like you said, I don't need to go to Vancouver to shoot a movie about, the back arse of somewhere in Ireland. I can do it in Ireland. It is possible. Like we've a lot of, and like there's a lot of odd and strange locations in Ireland, like you said, where you had to kind of use that, I guess, guerrilla style, for want of a better word, and use actual places. You weren't spending all this money on facades and all these different things. And I think that really lends itself to the movie as well, because it feels like, again, like I said, it's we are introduced to this world that's like already lived in. It doesn't feel like a movie world, if that makes sense. I feel like
Mhm.
I'm somewhere that exists, but also it's like so surreal and strange. So I'm like, this is like, I don't know, it's like some sort of hallucination.
That word comes.
So
I love the Sight and Sound review is like just described as hallucinatory chaos, and I'm like, I want that in a T-shirt. Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Oh,
How was your experience, I guess, overall then? Like while you were shooting the movie and everything, obviously, you get the story, you get everything, things move forward. The actual process then of shooting and post production and stuff, how was it? Was it like crazy grueling? Was it enjoyable?
I mean, the shoot was great. I mean, it was a 15-day shoot, which is very tight, but we had a terrific crew. Everybody was working for 150 euros a day, or deferred fees in some cases. Some of the I spoke to Peter Foote, who made the Young Offenders, about the best way to structure a deferred, a feature where you're deferring fees, and he said, don't do what I did, because I deferred everything, and then you got everybody who did a day's work on the film chasing you for a year, 2 years afterwards for the money they're owed, and because the film is doing well, I have to, and it becomes an admin nightmare, because he was basically figuring out ways to pay people, because he's very conscientious and brilliant, and I love that he's done that, because when I was telling people, we're doing the film on deferred fees, people get kind of like nervous about it, like they're never going to
Yeah.
get paid, because there's been so many films done like that where nobody got paid, and I just said, look, Peter Foote did the Young Offenders, everybody involved got a payday. Everybody's done well out of it. It can happen again. And people kind of went, okay. So the shoot was tremendously fun, because with a 15-day shoot, there's a big scene every day. There's no quiet days. The first day we had like 2 sex scenes. It was like we hit the ground running, and on the VFX scenes. I mean, once we got into the VFX stuff, there was a VFX scene every day for about a week, which was pretty hectic. Post production was not so much fun because you run out of money and you're kind of you're in a much it's like just down to two or three people trying to finish the film by ourselves. We had applied for completion funding to Screen Ireland. We were turned down. They finally changed their minds and decided to give it to us like about 2 weeks ago, with the film about to come out. So it was a grueling, long, drawn out year of trying to finish the film on no money. And then we have a premiere in October, and the film spoke to the audience, seemed to really work with people, and suddenly I started to feel good about it again. But the period between finishing the cut of the film sometime around April of last year and the premiere in October was a pretty long, dark night where there was no light. But you do come out the other end eventually. So yeah.
Is that something that I guess going forward, if this thing does what I personally expect it to do, and you start to get these offers on the table, or maybe offers of, well, what else have you got? We might put some money behind this, blah blah blah. Would you like to stay? Like, do you feel like you work better in those kind of circumstances where it's like a tight 15-day shoot? We need to just move and get things done.
Well, it depends on the script. I mean, All You Need Is Death was written to be made in 15 days. It was a 70-page script, If I wouldn't want to, I would prefer to stay at the lower end of the budget level because that's where you have more freedom. Once you get to sort of 10 million and up, people get nervous and worry. I was
Hmm.
watching the RoboCop documentary, which I recommend to everybody, called Creating RoboCop. I think it's on Prime, and the budget for RoboCop was 10 million, and they went 3 million over, and they nearly lost the movie because people started to get nervous, and the film was almost handed over to the completion guarantors who would have released it with no sound effects, without a proper score, and
It's
all the
wild.
miracle. It's wild, yeah, I know. And then the film went on to be what it was. But when you get to a stage where people are scared about losing their money, you can start to have a lot of problems. So I'm kind of hoping I can keep my stuff kind of squeezed. I like what people like Brandon Cronenberg are doing. I mean, I don't know what the budgets are in films like Possessor and Infinity Pool, but my God, he has made his own movies with them, and you don't feel any sense anybody's stepping on him creatively. So I think it's possible to make these movies, to do really interesting, really creative things if you kind of stay kind of personal and small and don't need massive stars and don't need tent pole releases. It seems to me to be a really interesting time for horror cinema. I mean, films like When Evil Lurks that came out last year.
Yeah.
Um, it's right up there with George Romero in terms of like really grueling, unpleasant, dark, uncompromising horror, which is what I love. So I kind of feel like I saw a ton of really good movies at Sitges when I was there. Our film European premiere was at Sitges, and I went to everything I could. It feels to me like there's a huge amount of really good medium budget to low budget horror being made at the moment. And if I can just find myself a little niche in there and make another two or three or four movies, I would be very, very happy with that.
How do you feel actually about we see these movies come out similar to your movie? I don't mean as in like style or tone or story or anything like that, but they just seem to kind of come on the scene and start to make all this noise. And when it does well, maybe a company looks at it and goes, "Hey, you know what we're going to do? We want to remake that with a bigger budget."
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm agnostic about the whole remake thing because, I mean, Netflix does it a remake of The Wages of Fear, which is one of my favorite films of all time. But nobody knows about it. It's been dumped on Netflix with no stars. It'll sink to the bottom of the algorithm. I just ignore that stuff. If somebody, I mean, Ben Wheatley, who's a mate and a lovely, an amazing guy and very creative filmmaker, has made a couple of remakes and sequels in the last few years, and people gave him a lot of stick for it. And I'm just like, Rebecca, the remake, the original is still there. You can just watch Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca
Hmm.
anytime you want to. Ben got a few quid. He's a great guy. He probably needed a payday. I don't have any problem with it. I'm not sure it's something I necessarily see a place for myself in. But if the originators of the film didn't get paid the first time, if somebody wanted to make a 15, 20, $25 million remake of All You Need Is Death and cast, Taylor Swift or something, I would, fine, like just
Yeah, yeah.
as long
Go
as I
for
get
it.
me and Ian get a paycheck and they can just do what they want. I don't know. Um, I don't have any patience for getting upset about those things. I think, remakes will always happen and the originals will always be there. It's only if they were destroying the original negative of Rebecca or Wages of Fear or
Yes.
The Hunter, then I'd be worried, but they're not.
Uh, Two final things. So, I guess going forward, then, throughout this conversation, I kind of feel like you're probably one of those people who, I guess, is inherently yourself. I talk about people like a lot of people give Rob Zombie a lot of shit, and all these different filmmakers, even Cronenberg and stuff, um, for some of the way they do things. The thing I like about that, and I feel like you're akin to them in the style of, um, you are you. You want to make the film you want to make, as in the sense of, like, I think a lot of people would be maybe teased with the idea of, oh, we've got some meetings lined up for you in LA with like people who are attached to TCM franchise or Freddy, and like instantly it'd be like, oh yeah, all that stuff I said about original work, oh, don't care, just get me on the Leatherface gravy train. And that's why I respect a lot of those filmmakers who, yeah, look, maybe some of the movies were a bit out there, a bit all over the place, but like they're always themselves. When Rob Zombie done Halloween, he gave you Rob Zombie's Halloween. Whether you liked it or not is one thing, but I will say he tried to stick to his own style, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that how you see yourself going forward? Are you going to continue to kind of, keep that original kind of feel?
I don't know. I mean, thing is, I've been doing this long enough to know that getting the great big paycheck to do the franchise or the IP exploitation thing doesn't always work out that great for the filmmakers. I mean, the Irish filmmakers who went over to do the Texas Chainsaw Netflix movie did not come out of that well. It ended up very badly for them. And I don't know, I don't know them, don't know the story behind it, but it's a cautionary tale of how if you decide to get into bed with Hollywood, it doesn't always work out great, and you got to do that with your eyes wide open. Some people come out of it with flying colors. Some people that get chewed up. So I think at this stage of my career, I would hope that I know the difference, and I would hope to stick to doing the kind of work that I really, really want to do. But at the same time, I am, I need money. I need a paycheck. I need a job. So if somebody came to me with something and said, are you interested? I will always read it and think about it and talk to them. But I also have a very clear idea. Your career progression often depends on the things you say no to as much as the things you say yes to.
Mm,
And I'm very keen to hang on to whatever momentum that I generated with my first film. Your second film can be even more important than your first in letting people know what you are about. And if you go and do, like, Ben did Down Terrace, then he did Kill List, and that was enough to kind of make him, give people an idea what a Ben Wheatley film was. Brandon Cronenberg did Antiviral, then he did Possessor, and that was enough for people to go. But if he'd done Antiviral and then done, a kind of a remake of Rabid
yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that. That was kind of would have been. I'm sure loads of people said, "Why don't you remake one of your dad's movies?" And if he'd done that, we probably wouldn't be talking about him right now. So I think it's really important to play your cards right and to stick to your guns, but at the same time, it's also important to survive and have some money. So I'm kind of going to do my best to do both with a bit of luck. We'll see.
Um, any crazy big plans for you in the States for the next 2 weeks? Anything
God
you're
no. I
excited
mean,
by?
I've been watching diners, drive-ins, and dives, and doing my research, so I know where to go in Kansas City and New Orleans to get some really good barbecue.
Nice.
I'm going to go to some voodoo shops in New Orleans and hopefully bring back some interesting souvenirs. I'm there to do. I'm there to do a job to introduce the film and to do some publicity and hopefully maybe do some interviews, some podcasts, and whatever. I want as many people as possible to see the film. My main thing is while I'm in Overlook, Paul Williams is going to be present at a screening of Phantom of the Paradise, which is a movie I love. And Paul Williams must be a million years old by now. So I'm really
Yeah.
impressed that he's going to be there. So, things like that. I'm kind of still a bit of a star fucker and a fanboy when it comes to stuff like that. I wouldn't get excited about many things, but Don Hertzfeld will also be there with his new film, and he's one of the greatest animators in the world. So, there's a couple of things. These are the fringe benefits of going to film festivals with a movie, is you might get to hang out with or see people you really admire or see movies you really love. That's really what I'm there for. I'm not there to do business. If it happens, it happens.
Going forward, then, like if we look after that, you come back to Ireland in mid to late April. The next 6, 12 months, then, how would you like that to pan out, or how do you see that looking?
I have no idea. I'm writing a script. I've got a second draft to do in another script. I'm hoping I can make them better. That's the aim. You want to make them better than the last one, and I'm hoping that I can get some money to survive. I mean, I'm still living hand to mouth. I don't have until we actually start to see some money come back from the film, which hopefully will happen after its streaming release. It's going to be on a major streamer sometime in July, I believe. So I mean, at the moment, I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm making it up as I go along, because made the film. The film is now out there. The film hopefully will start to get some notice, and then I'll just have to see what comes back, and because I'm an independent filmmaker, you can only work with what's out there, what opportunities are out there for you. So we'll have to see, but hopefully it'll be an interesting 6 months. Nothing astonishing has happened yet, but the film isn't out yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. Final question then. Why? I was going to ask why film, but I feel like people probably wouldn't have realized how knowledgeable you are about the genre itself and how interested you are
Mm-hmm.
um, in the genre. So why horror? What does it mean to you, I guess?
Uh, it's the most important genre for me because I think it's capable of taking on subjects that, if you do them in a straight up drama, they become kind of journalistic, or they become, I think for me, it's the most visceral, the most fascinating. I mean, films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Suspiria and Possession, I can watch over and over again and never get tired of them, because they're not about they're not trying to make a point. It's not like a film like Oppenheimer, which is about, oh my God, it's terrifying that we have nuclear weapons. Yeah, I know that. I grew up under Reagan and Thatcher. I grew up under the shadow of nuclear weapons. I don't really need a film to tell me that. But if I watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's a film about the possibility that somebody out there will malevolently just take you out of existence for absolutely no particular reason other than their appetite. And that can happen. It can happen anytime. And it's the absolutely the gaping chasm of chaos that underlies reality that we kind of tend to forget about, or prefer to forget about, but horror movies make that visible. Cure and Pulse, again, films that kind of remind you of the kind of Lovecraftian cosmic void that underlies our existence. And it's fun. I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with people like us that enjoy these movies, that find them but I mean, I watch normal films as well, but I tend to watch more horror films. So I don't
Yeah,
know. It's really hard. It's just a thing since I was a kid. That was always a fascination. I think because it was scary. And when you get to the point of being able to master your fears and go, you know what, this scared me, but now I can understand it and take it in and even enjoy it. Maybe that's a way of gaining control over the world. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Well, Paul, it's been a pleasure. I'm so
Thank you
happy
very much.
we could do this. I hope we can maybe revisit towards the end of the year. I guess post craziness of all this movie coming out and everything, it'd be interesting to I guess recap on the other end of the year just to see
Yeah,
how things are going.
sure. More
I
than.
wish you all the best.
And thank you
I
thank you very much for your kind words and your perceptive comments about the film, because it's really nice to hear.
Yeah, of course, of course. I think it's something that maybe doesn't get said often enough. People will just say a movie is either good or bad and don't really have any reason why. And maybe that in more modern times with streaming and the advent of how I guess accessible social media is, people will just see a movie is shit or good and
Yes.
just kind of say, "Oh yeah, it's shit." It's like, "Have you seen it?" No, but I heard it's shit. Or have you seen it? I heard it's good or whatever. Which I think is really unfair to all the hard work and effort and risk that goes in behind the scenes. But
Yeah,
like I said, I wish you all the best. For everybody listening, all the links to Paul's stuff will be in the description down below. And obviously, as we get information about streamers and stuff like that, they'll be added to the site.
and if
Like
you
I
can,
said, wish you all the best. I hope you have a great time in the States,
thank you.
and
And
I can't wait to see what comes next.
if people can come along to the IFI the first night on the 19th of April, we will have Ian Lynch there. He's not going to be around for many. He's so busy with the band; it's very hard to get him there. So there's a screening with him in the IFI in 19th of April, and then we're doing one in Letterkenny at Donegal at a sound festival. The sound festival beginning of May, I think it's the 5th of May. So either of those will be really good ones to go to. But it's also playing around the country: Belfast, Cork, Galway. I hope different places. I don't know the full list yet.
Oh, I didn't know about the one in the IFI. I think I'm gonna have to try and venture up there for that.
Yeah, please do. It'd be great to meet you.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Like I said, Paul, it's been a pleasure. I hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and yeah, we'll see everybody real soon.
Thank you, Aaron.